Hi, folks. You were Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to highlight and compare the pay that is paid to government employees for a particular job role, particular job function, and then to look at the equivalent job role, same responsibility, or approximately the same job role in the private sector. What do these two jobs pay? Now, traditionally, government, because government workers, do less work, they're lazy, things move very slowly because of bureaucracy, this sort of stuff. Typically, certainly, since I began working, government employees were typically paid, about 80%, 75% of the equivalent wage in the private sector. But the private sector had many more, senior jobs such as factory manager or, executive vice president of the company. So they had many more jobs in the higher pay bands. So if you wanted to sort of make money, the public, working for the government wasn't the way to do it. And again, say a computer programmer working for the government would get, for example, back in the day, would be paid $10,000 a year. Then in the private sector, you'd be paid $15,000 a year for that same job. Sure, you had to work harder and you needed more qualifications and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, that was the pay difference. But the government expected less of you. In the private sector, they expected more of you. And so the pay reflected that. Now, what the government did offer back in the day, anyway, was a job for life and quite a generous pension, so that if you wanted a predictable life and a predictable retirement, that sort of thing, then the government, working for the government, could supply that. Now, all that's changed, and this is all across the Western world. The pay for government roles has increased at a surprising rate, whereas the pay in the private sector has been quite severely depressed. Now, if mass migration depresses wages in the private sector, you think it would have the equivalent effect in the government sector. But actually, it's the reverse, because the DEI, affirmative action jobs in government jobs, are now being sort of quite richly paid compared to the private sector. So I'm looking at a job. This is for a regional government here. And by the way, this regional government, they feature photographs of, come and work for the government. And the photographs in it feature a very lesbian-looking white woman and a light brown guy and a dark brown girl and an Asian-looking, rather gay-looking man, actually. So there's not a single white male in any of their advert depictions. None, not one. Now, if you get onto the employment listing of that particular regional government, then it seems like everyone is called, Muhammad or Nabil or Rashid or there's no Bill, Bob, and Harry's sort of defined there. So we've got a situation here where the government job pays about $175,000 a year, give or take, around that. And the equivalent job in the private sector, though, and there are companies, they're not big multinationals, but there are companies that supply that same service and are often used by this regional government, things like forestry management, for example, and used by local government and subcontracted out. But the workers there doing exactly the same job are paid about 110. So the private sector pays 110,000 a year. The government job requires lesser qualifications, shorter hours, and less onerous work requirements, pays $175,000. So this is a substantial difference. So the range seemed to be very consistently between 60 and 70% higher wage or income being paid to the government worker to do the exact same or even a lesser job than in the private sector. Now, this is a chasm that's opened up here. Why? Now, I wouldn't mind so much if the government was only employing the very best quality people with the most credentials, but they're not. The reverse is the case. They're paying much higher wages in the private sector, but they're only employing affirmative action and DEI people to do that. So that people are coming in straight into these jobs in Australia, the first world, straight into these government jobs and being paid more than the private people are being paid in the private sector. Now, there's a few other things here. The English requirement for these people coming in from the third world and working for the government, the bar is very low. You can barely understand some of these people. A very low bar. Their qualifications are all got from third world countries where corruption is rampant and rife. So the likelihood is they actually don't have those qualifications. They're all invented and fantasized into existence. And yet they're given these jobs in a very low bar where a committee of mostly lesbian women will decide to hire them. Or so, they've probably been told to. So there's a huge surplus in these government departments of black and brown people and LGBTQ and so on. Social engineering on a grand scale, racial and so on, social engineering on a grand scale. But the bar is very, very low, and it's set purposefully low so they can hire these third world peasants and shoehorn them into these jobs that pay, on a relative basis, pay very, very well. Now, those same DEI affirmative action hires, if they applied for the $110,000 version of the job in the private sector, the equivalent job that they've been gifted and given and handed out and affirmative actioned into in the government employment, if they applied for the job in the private sector, they wouldn't have a snowball's chance of getting it. Not a snowball's chance. They wouldn't be qualified. They wouldn't meet the language requirements. They wouldn't even, if they even got an interview, there's no way they'd get hired. Unless the regional government said to these guys, look, we won't give you any government work unless you have, 100 million black lesbians on your payroll. Other than that, there is no way these people would qualify for this sort of work. They haven't even come from a country or a place in the world that would have anything like the same sort of policies, procedures, structures, education, knowledge, and so on. Whether it be with flora and fauna and forest management or any other endeavour. But they're still gifted the job over much better qualified white people. So the white people are clearly being pushed to one side just so they can employ these unqualified black and brown people. But in the private sector, the job pays a great deal less, but for much higher level of qualifications. So that's the madness that we're in at the moment, and it's not just in Australia and not just in this regional government, but everywhere. Now, if I go to this council, if I go to the council on the executive level and or not council, like regional government, and they're all white people. They're all well-connected white, but there's no brown and black people there. It's the middle, and probably just in the first band of upper middle jobs and so on that are being gifted to these black and brown folks who haven't earned it. There's no merit in him applying here. But these are now in that category of employment. These are the best paid jobs by far, and they're being gifted at the taxpayer's expense. They're being gifted through affirmative action DEI to third world peasants that are flooding in and are non-meritoriously being appointed to these jobs. It's insane. It's insanity on steroids. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.